What's up, crew? It's Chris with CloverTac, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm going to do a follow-up video to a video that I did about 5 years ago. The subject of that video was how to reset the mechanical zero on a rifle scope. So that's what we're going to talk about, and you might wonder, why would you have to do that? Why would you have to return your scope, the turret adjustments, to mechanical zero or factory zero? And there could be a couple of reasons that you wanted to do that. First of all, maybe you picked up a used scope at the pawn shop or something like that, and you wanted to make sure everything as far as the adjustments were centered before you put it on your rifle and started to try to sight it in. It would just make it that much easier. And the second reason is maybe you're going to replace the scope on your rifle and you want to repurpose the scope you're taking off onto something else. Now, one way that you could do this is to take the caps off of the turrets on your scope and dial it all the way clockwise or counterclockwise, doesn't really matter, until that adjustment stops. Then turn it back the opposite direction, counting the clicks. Then once you get to the stop at the opposite direction, cut that number in half and then reverse it and go back halfway. Now, there's a couple of reasons that I don't like doing that. First of all, the turrets on a scope are typically one of the most fragile parts. You're dealing with a lot of little gears and notches and springs and stuff like that. And adjusting these more than you need to sometimes can lead to failure where the adjustments don't stay in place. The second thing is that it's just absolutely time consuming. You got to count clicks, remember numbers, and that sucks. Here we are on the bench, got a couple of scopes ready to make this happen. And right off the bat, there are a few things you need to go before you start this process. The first is, when we're talking about resetting the turrets back to zero, with this particular method, it can only be done with a second focal plane scope. So if you have a first focal plane scope, that's not going to work. Also, when you're talking about red dots and things like that, this is not going to work either. It's dependent upon reflection through this mirror. So if you don't have a telescopic style sight, then it's not going to work. Next, if your scope has a sunshade, you want to be sure and remove that sunshade from the end of your scope. Now, neither one of the scope examples I have today have an adjustable objective. If your scope does have an adjustable objective or parallax, you're going to want to set that to infinity. At the same time that you do that, if you have a variable power scope, 3 to 9, 4 to 16, whatever, make sure that you set that power to its lowest setting. Now, you're going to need access to your turrets to adjust them back to this factory setting. So if you've got scope caps, go ahead and remove those. If you have some type of locking mechanism on your turret, go ahead and take that lock off or unscrew that lock, loosen that lock, whatever, so that your turrets can be adjusted. And finally, we're down to the nitty gritty. We're going to take our mirror. We're simply going to set that on a flat surface. We're going to take our scope and set our scope down on that mirror. Now, I do find that this method works better outside with sunlight. It's a little bit overcast today, but it's still good enough. Indoors with indoor lighting just doesn't seem to work as well. And fair warning, I'm not going to be able to show you what's in the eyepiece. So here in just a second, I will throw a graphic up on the screen to kind of represent what I'm looking at through this eyepiece. Now, depending on the eye relief on your scope, you may have to play around with it as far as being able to see through it. But when you look through that scope, you'll see two sets of crosshairs. Now, I got to mention too, make sure that you hold the scope steady onto that mirror. Don't slide it around, because that's going to make those reticles in there seem to move. And yes, I said reticles, because when you look through this, you're going to see two reticles. You're going to see your main reticle, the actual reticle in the scope. And that's going to be a really dark black line like you would normally see if you were looking through it. But you're also going to see an echo or a shadow of a reticle. And that's important, because that's going to help us adjust this thing out. So as I look through this scope here, my eye is fairly centered in that eyepiece. That's what you want. And by looking at this, those reticles are not on top of each other. That's what we want to do. We want to adjust and bring that shadow or that echo in line with the dark reticle. So there we go. It was that easy. My echo was just a little bit high. Now I'm just going to put the cap back on this one, get it out of the way. That's ready to go on the shelf. It's ready to go on another rifle. And we're going to move on to our other one. We've got the turrets exposed. Set that in the middle of our mirror. And let's take a look. So this one seems to be off left to right. All I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust that where, again, the main crosshair lines up with that echo of a crosshair. I'll throw a little graphic on the screen again to represent what it looks like. And there we go. That one is now factory aligned or factory reset to 0. Going to put our caps on, put our sunshade back on, and then this one will be ready to set on the shelf and hopefully use on a rifle in the future. So there you are, crew. There is how you reset your scope to a factory 0 or mechanical 0 using a $1 mirror from the Dollar Tree. Now, I'll throw a link to that old video somewhere around here, probably in an end card. You can check that out if you want. But today's video is an updated version that contains all the information in that video, plus more. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. And until next time, don't forget to chain fire freedom.